with a story that I like to share wherever I go, and maybe some of you have heard me share it before, because it shares the other power we have, of the many powers we have, and that's our good sense of humor. Our good sense of humor. Because it's really true, I really believe the Creator loves laughter. It's the one healing medicine that has helped us through everything we've gone through. My grandmother passed away here about 4 years ago. She was 97 years old. As a young girl, she knew old Tatanka Yotanka, Sitting Bull, and PZ, Gall, and a lot of those old men. And she told me about them. She said, you know, those men were so gentle in their homes. They'd never lift their voice, especially in the presence of elders, especially in the presence of visitors where they wanted to show special respect. But she told me specifically, and she must have told me this story 20 times, and every time she told it, she'd laugh at certain times and cry at others. But she told me the story of this old man Good Elk. And she said that as a young girl, she used to go visit this old man, because this old man's close relatives had kind of forgotten about him because they'd been going through hard times. And he lived right above the Missouri River in a little one-room log cabin. He had teamsila, or dried turnips, hanging, and dried meat hanging down, all these things. Said it smelled real good. She used to go up there and cut wood for him and so forth. But she said this one day, she said, Tunkashla, grandfather, was standing there waiting for her. And she got to him, and he said, you know, granddaughter, Takoshai, he said, I can hear my old friends calling me. Said it won't be long before I'm going to take in my journey home. But you know, before I do, he said, before I go, I've saved just a few dollars, he said. He said, I'd like you to go and see if you can find me a suit of clothes. So when they put me back into Mother Earth, he said, I can see that my body goes back there with respect. So she went to a little town called Lethbridge, South Dakota. I go down there every summer, going down to our Sundance, and I always think about this. She found in this old penny store, Sears and Roebuck store, up on a high shelf, the suit of clothes that nobody else could wear, because old man Good Elk was about 6'5". And she was able to get, in her own words, like she liked to call, a good bargain. She always liked good bargains. So she bought that, and she said she came back to grandfather's house on the top of that hill, and there the old man was standing, just as if he knew she was going to come at that exact time. When she got to him, she handed him the suit of clothes. And when she did, she said she looked down. And she said, Unchi, she says, poor thing. I looked down, and his shoes were all worn out. He said, you know, we were so poor. We didn't have money for anything, even money, or even to buy him shoes. We didn't have any buckskin even to make him moccasins. We were so poor at that time. And here he was, his shoes all worn out, his toes sticking out. But then she said, he held me around. He said, you know, Takoja, he said, don't worry about that. I've been thinking about it already, he said. You know, he said, so many of our loved ones have walked that road before me. They made the path kind of soft. When it comes time for me to go home, I'm just going to take off my shoes and socks. He said, I'm going to go across barefoot. He said, when I get to the other side, I'm going to hear my friends singing. They're really going to be singing. He said, I'm going to come sit by them. We're going to sing. We're going to sing that you're going to live a long life. And we're going to sing that you're going to see the day when your grandchildren and the grandchildren of the people will again arise and recognize their destiny and recognize that we have laid a path through them long before they were born through our prayers. And we're going to live to see the day when you come home. You're going to know we're going to be there. And you know, the day she died very suddenly. The day she died, she called the funeral director. She lovingly told him how she wanted her funeral planned, who was going to be the pallbearers, and so forth, and she died. So I know that they were there waiting for her. Well, anyway, it came time the old man was dying. And I always think about this. The most marvelous and wondrous things sometimes happen times we least expect it, and they certainly don't happen in the local country club. Because here was the old man. They had him laid out in an old Department of Indian Affairs Army cot. They used to issue the Indians. And I'll tell you, if he wouldn't have been in a coma and unconscious, he would never have slept on that, because he always used to like to say, my grandmother said, he liked to sleep on his mother, right on the earth. They'd never be able to put him on that cot. And they had him all covered with these army blankets. And there's two very strong customs among the Lakota people, and I'm sure among all other tribes. In fact, they were doing it that night with that elder woman up at Hobima, and that is, when somebody's dying or very sick, all the friends come together and pray with that person. Now, if it's time for them to go on, at least they get a chance, and you get a chance to be with them one last time. Because isn't there so many times we lose loved ones, we don't even know if we're going to lose them. They're gone. And if they get better, we can give thanksgiving. And the other strong custom among the Lakota people is we take the person's personal belongings and give them away. Some tribes do this within a year, sometimes right after the death. It's a giveaway. Give away everything. Well, here was the old man. He was unconscious, laying on this old army cot covered with these blankets, and all the relatives had gathered. They just jammed this one-room log cabin. And my grandmother was sitting right by his head, and she said, boy, it was terrible. Really embarrassing. Because the relatives who should have been taking care of him were totally embarrassed. And the other relatives were embarrassed for the other relatives. You know, one of kind of these deals. Because it's true, the hurt of one is the hurt of all. That's a sacred teaching we all know from any tribe we come from. The hurt of one is the hurt of all. The honor of one is the honor of all. And so here they were, they tried to pray, but they were so embarrassed they couldn't even pray anymore. It was just dead silence. All they could hear was the old man in this death rattle kind of going like this. Well, finally, one of his nephews just couldn't stand it anymore. The worst offender lived right up the creek. Because as the old man kept shaking, he pulled those blankets off his feet. And here were these two big dirty feet sticking up. That was all they could take. So finally, real quietly, you just about hear the floor squeak. He went over there and got a hold of those blankets. He started pulling on them, trying to cover the old man's feet up again. Well, about that time, my grandmother said, the old man woke up. A little twinkle in his eye. Nobody even knew he was awake. And she could tell that he wanted to kind of have one more last good one before he left. Said it was just dead silence. Here's a nephew trying to pull on those blankets. Then all of a sudden, real loud in Indian, he said, "Hey, nephew!" I guess everybody just... And he said, "Nephew," he said, "don't take it yet," he said. "I need it just a little bit longer," he said, "then you can have it." And with that, the old man went on his journey. And I'm sure he's here with us tonight. So it's my prayer as we go along that we can have a good laugh. And we can remember that the Creator has placed within our own communities all the strength necessary to develop, to share. I know a lot of times I go speak different places and people say, gee, what you have to say is really good. But you know what I found out a long time ago? That whatever I have to say that makes any sense was said long, long before I was ever born by the elders in whatever reserve I'm visiting. And you know something else? Everything that everybody thinks I'm saying that's so good, their relatives are saying to it every day. It's just that somehow we've learned to kind of plug our ears to one another. Yeah, I know Delphine, good striker. Yeah, I remember her when she was just a little kid. What does she have to say? So that's been placed within each one of us. Our communities have that strength. And so I just pray that as we go along, we can remember old man Goodell, get up in the morning, greet ourselves in the Creator with a good prayer. If we happen to have a mirror in our house, look in there and say, and that's what I do anymore. I say, God, you know, you're really lucky. If there was a blizzard, you could crawl inside and save yourself. You got the most beautiful nose in the whole world. And you got hair that looks like lightning. So I thank you very, very much. Again, it's a real honor to be here in the land of my good Dakota relatives. How? Omitako Yasi, all my relatives. Ho.